It is so wonderful to be back again at the Eureka Centre. On my last visit, I spoke about the manufacturer and department store Foy & Gibson, and I think I recognised some faces from that session, so thank you for returning again. You might remember that research was supported by the State Library Victoria and the University of Melbourne during my time as Redmond Barry Fellow. As Redmond Barry Fellow, I also had the opportunity to research a second iconic Victorian clothes manufacturer, which is, of course, Fletcher Jones. Oh, it's looking a bit off-centre. We'll see if we can fix that up. So the fellowship provided me with access to the State Library Victoria's collections, together with the incredibly rich Fletcher Jones business and family records in the University of Melbourne archives. Its many hundreds and hundreds of documents and photographs have informed my presentation for you today. So I'd like to thank the teams of the State Library Victoria and of the University of Melbourne archives for their support of my research, together with the Fletcher Jones Family Foundations for their very kind permission to use the material that you'll see across my slides to follow. And this really is a treasure trove of photographs, of documents, of advertising artwork and other material. So I was introduced to the name Fletcher Jones early, and I'm sure many of you were too. So that's me, purchased on the fence and held in place, I think somewhat precariously, by my older sister. And we're just about to take a walk through the Fletcher Jones Gardens in Warrnambool. These are gardens that I know many of you will also have enjoyed over the last half century. And it may be that closer to home, some of you have shopped at the Fletcher Jones store here in Ballarat. It's only in more recent years, however, that I've thought about the impact of the clothes that Fletcher Jones made. And with this in mind today, I'm going to split my presentation in 3 sections. So I won't undertake a history of the Fletcher Jones business, though aspects of this will pop up along the way. And I won't present a biography of a really fascinating man, though I hope across the next hour you'll get a good sense of what made Fletcher Jones tick. And for more on these, I really encourage you to explore the fabulous FJ Stories website if you haven't done so already. But what I'd like my contribution today to do is something a little different. So to think anew about the clothes that Fletcher Jones made, how they were worn, what they mean to a history of Australian fashion, and indeed to a history of Australia. And you'll know from my presentation today that a dominant thread will run through it, and that's Jones's use of Australian wool. So I'll concentrate in particular on the period immediately following the Second World War and move through to around 1970. So I could have begun earlier and I could extend to later than those dates, but I do have reasons for selecting these years. The first has to do, of course, with my starting point and the slogan used by Jones as he launched his first Melbourne store in 1946, and you'll see it here. No man is hard to fit. So my first section considers Jones's trousers and his male customers in this post-war period. In my second section, I'm going to move from men's to women's wear 10 years later. I'm going to shift focus to Jones's skirts and slacks, to the Australian Wool Fashion Awards, and to the rising competition from synthetic fibres. And I'll also introduce the Woolmark symbol. And to finish my presentation, my very short third section links in with what I think we can learn from Fletcher Jones in relation to a pressing contemporary concern, and that's the environmental toll wrought by fast fashion. So in that third section, I'll trace how Fletcher Jones's refurbishing service could inspire a return from a disposable, throwaway clothing culture to a more mindful form of slow fashion. With that outline in mind, let me take you to 1946. You'll see it here. Men rushed to Fletcher Jones's first Melbourne store when it opened in June of that year. A queue stretched along the footpath outside for weeks. All were waiting to buy the one, and let me stress, the only style of trousers sold there. A pair of +8s. Here they are. So +8s were named for the 8 extra inches of fabric incorporated into the front of the waistband. An exciting and fashionable prospect as Australians moved from the control of World War II clothes rationing and styling regulations. So great was the demand that trousers couldn't be made and sent fast enough from Jones's Warrnambool factory. Men returned day after day to stand in this queue, waiting their turn. Jones recalled how, and this is a quote, "It was an alarming experience to see the mob outside, thick, heavy, and untamed." What he lacked in variety, Jones made up for by focusing attention on his customers' bodies to achieve the perfect fit, whatever men's shape or size. His specially trained fitters measured each and every customer in store, reassuring them that no man is hard to fit, and you see that slogan again down the bottom of this advertisement. Fletcher Jones's attention to Australian men's bodies in this post-war period strikes me as being really quite important, with his recognition of a masculine body consciousness that could be heightened on troops' return from World War II service. There were consequences for clothing that fit when some men's bodies had changed significantly as a result of war, whether they were now slimmer or more muscular, whether they'd developed from that of a younger man, for those captured as prisoners of war, or for men who returned to Australia with a disability. And Jones would, in the years to follow, continue to display an intimate understanding of a wide variety of masculine silhouettes, something that would underpin his business for decades. And so would his insistence on using Australian wool. Jones persisted in using the finest merino wool, even as synthetics spectacularly entered the menswear market across the mid-century decades, reminding his customers again and again of the benefits of the natural fibre. But please let me backtrack for a moment, as I don't want to suggest that Jones's business suddenly appeared in Melbourne in 1946. Rather, after being medically discharged from the AAF in 1918, Jones received a repatriation department loan to begin his hawking business, selling clothes and goods in Victoria's Western District. He did this firstly from a wagon hitched to a pair of horses, and then later from a fleet of trucks. His Warrnambool tailoring and men's clothing shop opened in 1924, and Jones started to make good quality, ready-to-wear trousers the following decade. Trousers, however, would not become a core focus of the business until 1941, at the request of the Commonwealth Department of Supply. Jones noted in his memoir decades later that this wartime request gave us good direction for the first time. The Commonwealth Controller of Clothing, Alan Davis, and the Commonwealth Controller of Woolens, Jim Vickers, had visited Warrnambool that year to inspect Jones's tailoring workrooms. They were desperately in need of trousers for Australian troops, though Jones knew the enormous quantities they required were impossible for him to manufacture. He proposed that they might make smaller numbers of good quality trousers rather than cheap army trousers. But another option soon presented itself. At a meeting held between primary producers and government officials shortly after, the delegation, according to Jones, demanded much better trousers for the saddle, that is, for men working the land, than what they could currently purchase. Those available were not only poorly made but unfit for purpose, though men still had to use 8 of their precious clothing coupons for each pair of trousers. So Jones began to make trousers for these men. He was supplied with Vickers cloth. One loom at the Marrickville Mills in Sydney was dedicated to producing a measurement called 2 pieces per week. This length of cloth could make about 85 to 90 pairs of trousers. And a small number of skilled men were also released from war service to set up the factory for dedicated trouser production. This came as cloth shortages across Australia hit hard. Civilians were urged to create new clothes from old, extending the wearable life of their garments through creative means. The Commonwealth Rationing Commission's New Clothes from Old booklet that you see here provided the ideas and the encouragement to do so. And as shortages escalated, John Dedman, Minister for War Organisation of Industry, introduced what was called victory styling to Australia. This attempt to save cloth and other supplies like buttons and thread for the war effort saw the introduction of the victory suit that you see here in 1942. Dedman modelled it for the press, and that's him on the left, to promote the new styling regulations that controlled the look and the shape of suits and that stripped them of all non-essential features. So one of the first things to go was the buttons at the cuff. But plenty of Australians still hungered for fashion. A black market emerged with clothing materials stolen after leaving mills, in transit from wharves or train stations, or in warehouses where they were stored prior to distribution. For the right price, clothing was sold without the required coupons, though this price was severely inflated. Material used to make men's suits was eagerly sought and made up by backroom tailors or sold by door-to-door agents. And the public, exuberant and unpatriotic as it was seen, embrace of fashion generated real outrage. This reached a crescendo with a young jitterbug in Sydney's Trocadero nightclub in 1943, when George Kirzoulis was photographed clad in a zoot suit. The exaggerated jacket nearly reached his knees, while the strange ballooning trousers clung to his ankles. All the better for dancing in, he told bewildered reporters. These loose trousers were an extreme example of those that men had begun to favour before the war, and that grew in spite or because of the controls. So despite the wartime cloth restrictions, Fletcher Jones's trousers were of better quality than could be found elsewhere. Even then, however, thin seams and poor quality thread meant they weren't up to Jones's high standards. He asked his staff to have all the buttons sewn on twice, for example, in an attempt to overcome some of these shortcomings. Jones also aimed to make his wartime trousers comfortable and, perhaps surprisingly, a little bit fashionable, or at least as fashionable as wartime styling restrictions allowed. The main thing was that men liked them, Jones acknowledged, because of the full draped front. But mind you, he continued, unless these trousers were fitted neatly, they looked a fright. Plus-8s flourished in the Australian market in the post-war years at a moment when men sought out clothing designed to be worn more casually than a suit. Styled as sports trousers, plus-8s might be teamed with a sports jacket in another colour like you see in this artwork. They could be paired with knitwear that become popular for men in the interwar years, or they could be worn with an open neck shirt and rolled up sleeves as masculine dress codes relaxed. And as Australia's tailors struggled to keep up with the demand for civvy suits that were given to men on demobilisation from war service, sports trousers offered an alternative once considered unthinkable as a garment for professional men to wear on their return to the office. Jones placed tantalising descriptions of his +8 trousers in Melbourne's newspapers in the weeks leading up to the opening of his store. The enticing drape style, the full cuffs and double-stitched seams had been prohibited just a few years earlier. +8's fine tailoring was lavishly described in these advertisements as a masterpiece of workmanship and precision. A pure merino cloth registered with the name Coverdine was produced exclusively by Vickers Woolen Mills for Jones's use. Customers could select their +8s in colours alluringly described as rich new shades, including Cambridge grey, Manhattan fawn, and olive brown. Some of those men who streamed into the city in 1946 waited by the shop's doors from 6:30 each morning. This cartoon was published a few years later, but it captures that moment of anticipation. Those who made it to the front of the queue and into the store on the first day were allowed 2 pairs each. But the trousers sold so quickly and the queue remained so long that the limit was reduced to 1 pair per man. The shortage of trousers and the number of customers meant that it was sometimes 3 months before a man obtained his pair. During this time, Jones struggled to clothe his own staff, and he regretted that his Collins Street's fitters looked like a piebald lot, as he described them. Specially trained staff were on hand to personally measure every man and then to fit him into one of the 72 sizes available. Jones was adamant that his trousers be fit to each man's shape and size, and he was not afraid to stop customers in the street when he saw them wearing his trousers. He especially made the effort to do so, to ask about their experience of being fitted when the trousers looked more like sloppy joes, as he called them, than he would have liked. And this personal fitting was critical. That 8 extra inches that draped from the waistband was both a selling point and a potential pitfall. If trousers of this design are not properly fitted, Jones acknowledged, they look like glorified bloomers. A commitment to expand his size options saw the number increase from 72 to 92 sizes just a few months later, and you can see the 92 sizes here. Then to 121 sizes. Then 181 sizes, as you can see here. It would grow even larger in years to come to over 300 sizes that you can see in this slide, when every inch waist measurement was catered for, from 22 to 54 inches. Jones's scientific fractional fittings were made with different heights and shapes in mind, whether men were short or extra long in the leg, or portly or stout around the middle. With this enormous number of ready-made sizes produced at the Warrnambool factory, Jones called himself the ready-to-wear trouser specialist. And though he largely avoided tailoring to measure, Jones made an exception for the man that he called the difficult figure, or perhaps a little bit more politely, the not-so-easy-to-fit figure. For these men, he made what he called specials. But he encouraged his fitters, please refrain from thinking the customer needs a special. Please try on trouser after trouser, and you will be surprised with the results. Fitters were taught to recognise men with a hollow back, a stooped or sway figure, a prominent or a flat seat, those with flat hips, and for whom the growing number of scientific sizes would not fit in the precise, pleasing way that Jones insisted. And as Jones and his fitters observed more men in these trousers, they also looked out for those with prominent hip bones, with heavy thighs or prominent calves, for uneven leg lengths, for those wearing calipers or artificial limbs, and for wheelchair fittings. All men should leave his shop in nothing less than the perfect pair of trousers for their particular body. And Jones believed that though some surcharges for deviations away from his existing styles was necessary, there must be no extra charge for men who needed adjustments because of their disability. In the years to follow, Jones expanded beyond his one style of trousers. Yet +8s with their high-rise waistband, draped front, and clean-fitting back and hips continued to be a benchmark for those to follow. The stout style that you can see here at the top was described as really a +8, adapted for bigger men. Slightly more room is given proportionately for a bigger tummy and seat. Conservatives, that you'll also see here, were meant for the slightly stout figure who Jones recognised in +8s sometimes looked a bit like a chaff bag tied in the middle. The drape is ugly, whereas a conservative has nice slimming lines. And the pastoralist style that you see here were cut a trifle larger in the waist for greater ease of movement than +8s, and this card with its fabric sample outlined. And discussions around new sizes continued, including for one called betweens for the thick-set man. While travelling overseas, Jones was inspired to write home and asked that the trade name tummy tuckers be registered. He intended to apply the name to trousers for men, and he wrote, "I imagine ladies would not be interested in this particular name." His international tours had also demonstrated the popularity of narrow trousers that skimmed the hips and the legs, particularly for English men. Jones wrote home to his staff of the vogue for these skinny trousers. He wrote, "I left England with but a vague idea of what an Englishman looks like from the waist up. But boy, oh boy, did I get a picture of the draping of their nether regions." Jones started to make narrow trousers for the young, slim man, a more fashion-focused, though not necessarily more body-conscious consumer. Fitters were cautioned, however, to show this style only to select men whose figures would suit the unforgiving lines, in order to avoid any embarrassment or discomfort the fit might cause to others. But this wasn't all that was happening in Fletcher Jones's stores, as his trousers flew off the shelves. At the same time that Jones and his fitters worked to dress men in the best trousers possible for their body shape, they also trained customers to appreciate the high-quality cloth from which those trousers were made. Jones adored wool, writing to his staff of what he called the lovely, lovely, lovely pure merino stuff that we use. The fitters played a special role, asked to always handle the garments with respect, love, and care. This underlined the quality of the trousers, the professionalism of the fitters, but also made an impression on those men who witnessed the caress. Handle your garment with loving hands, fitters were encouraged. Pat it, touch it, feel it. Our merchandise is the finest, the fitter's manual instructed. Jones certainly was not blind to the possible virtues of other fibres beside fine wool, he explained in this booklet. But rather, testing had persuaded him that no man-made fibre compares with the natural properties of wool for trousers. Jones pointed to wool's soft handling, insulation, and elasticity. You'll see that here. But he also appreciated his fortunate position of being able to select the pick of the fine merino wool market. He was, as he phrased it, persuaded that there is no substitute to pure merino worsted, especially when crease fixed with the Cyroset patent process. This Australian development permanently pressed the natural fibre and was a really critical advance in science that worked to position wool against the exciting potential for synthetics to permanently hold crisp creases. Jones, nevertheless, offered a small range of trousers in a terylene and wool blend. Terylene was the brand name given by Imperial Chemical Industries to polyester, and this had begun to flourish in Australia. So after extensive tests, Jones added 10% terylene to some of his coverdine cloths to increase durability and reduce the tendency to shrink. But even then, he continued to consider a pure woolen fabric, such as our top-grade merino cloths, gives a more satisfied feeling of comfort and appearance with durability. It retains that good soft handling characteristic of all wool. The challenge was how to help his customers think this way. Most customers buy wool because they have faith in it, he remarked. But new generations of untrained customers, as he called them, were constantly emerging. They needed to be reminded of the benefits of wool and its superior natural qualities. So in-store signage helped, and you can see some of it here, the bottom left corner. So did Jones's fitters, as they gently steered men towards pure wool. Yes, we have good stocks of terylene mixtures, and we feel that we have the best quality of terylene. They were encouraged to respond to requests. But we would like you to please accept, sir, that we cannot agree with the outside advertising claims of how terylene is supposed to perform. Fitters would then place trousers in a terylene wool blend and a pure wool side by side, asking the customer, which feels best to you, sir? When Jones received a special wool award from the Australian Wool Board in 1964, it recognised Fletcher Jones and his staff's consistent fight against synthetic opposition. So with this in mind, let me now pivot to Fletcher Jones's skirts. But by the time Jones was presented with this award, had also played a central part in the business for almost a decade. Jones had been approached by the Australian Olympic Committee to make the uniforms for the 1956 Melbourne Games, both men's trousers and, a little more worryingly, women's skirts. Jones's reputation had been built on his "no man is hard to fit" guarantee, marking a significant move from men's to women's wear, and from the skills of fitting men's bodies to fitting women's. Jones's skirts and slacks, however, quickly found a place in the Australian women's wear market. Female fitters were trained in measuring techniques and to emphasise for their customers the features of garments. And for skirts, this meant the closures, the adjustable curved comfort waistband, the quality of the materials, and the quality trimmings. The 1957 Fitters Manual described a number of skirt styles available, those with inverted or box pleats or knife pleats, with welts or pocket flaps. Some styles suited most figures. Others were more appropriate for certain figures than others. One that was called Style 5, with its pocket flaps at the waistband, was described as not so suitable if the client has a tendency for a soft high tummy, as the pocket flips stick out like cow's ears. Style 6 was described as very good for a barrel type figure, while Style 14 was very good for a sway back type. The fitting remains central to Jones's move into skirts and slacks. So did his high quality standards that saw Jones recognised many times in the Australian Wool Fashion Awards, including these gold medal winners. First introduced in 1955 as the major fashion promotional activity of what was then called the Australian Wool Bureau, the Wool Fashion Awards quickly became what industry commentators called Australia's fashion event of the year. The number of entries rose sharply, from 300 in that first year in 1955. By 1960, entries had passed 1,000 garments for the first time, and by 1966, entries had more than doubled again as they spilled in from Australia's leading designers, mills, and manufacturers. Fashion experts and the Australian Wool Bureau representatives acted as judges, and the models wearing entries might be asked to return to the judges 2 or 3 times as they focused their expert eyes on styling, fashion rightness, workmanship, quality of fabric, and value for money. Styling and fashion rightness was key in these awards, and it was scored out of 50 points. Workmanship and finish followed with 30 points, and then fabric was scored out of 20 points. The Wool Fashion Awards became one of the AWB's most successful initiatives, encouraging local mills, manufacturers, and designers to produce fresh and innovative clothes in pure wool. The awards intended to underline wool's versatility, to demonstrate how it could be used for everything from elegant evening gowns to chunky men's jumpers, how it could be made glamorous but warm and snug, how it suited all ages, from matrons, a term commonly used at that time for older women with a larger figure, but also the much sought youth markets, and how it could transition seamlessly from day to night. The Wool Fashion Awards also pulled attention away from synthetic clothes that were backed by massive promotional budgets. Some women needed a little more convincing to purchase Jones's award-winning slacks than others. In late 1950s, women's tapered wool slacks were still in the process of throwing off their long-held masculine associations. Some women had adopted slacks in the 1930s, following Hollywood star Marlene Dietrich's lead. And young women in the 1950s had pushed this forward, including members of the youth subculture, the Widgies, who had worn pedal pushers and even denim jeans, to the horror of some stuffy commentators. But as slacks for holiday and beachwear rose in popularity, more women embraced the garment. For those who were worried about the fit of slacks, this Fletcher Jones advertisement encouraged women to recognise their fun-loving comfort. The fittings from 22 to 40-inch waists meant that they were so amazingly becoming, even to ladies who have not previously worn slacks. Jones continued to train his expert eyes on the clothes that people around him wore. With his wife Rena, aboard the ship the Himalaya as it sailed through Hong Kong, Yokohama, Honolulu, San Francisco to Vancouver in 1960, Jones enjoyed what he called a kaleidoscopic view of trousers, skirts and slacks from all over the world. But this also included time for reflection, which he shared in letters written to staff back home in Warrnambool. As they neared Thursday Island, Jones worried about cheaper materials being purchased for skirts that didn't meet what he called his whole life's work in building a reputation for the highest quality standards. Customers he knew now expected the best, a standard that had been introduced by his trousers decades earlier. No doubt about it, people do expect top shelf quality always from us, Jones fretted, thinking of a possible decline, and he would do all that he could to protect the company's good name for quality. On the ship, Jones met plenty of people eager to talk about their experience of his skirts and trousers. 2 women from Adelaide who told him how lovely our skirts are from the inside, and one lady made bold to say that if Sportscraft would only finish their skirts on the inside as well as we do ours, she thought Sportscraft qualities would be hard to beat. Sportscraft was a direct competitor in the Australian skirt market, and Jones was all too aware of the comparisons made between their skirts. Another 3 Australian women got chatting with Jones, And before where I knew where I was, they commenced talking about the quality of our skirts. All had purchased in 1959 and were just sheer delighted with the quality, he wrote. This quality is vividly captured in Jones's catalogues across the 1960s. This image from the 1963 catalogue describes how fractional sizes ensure the precise fitting in skirts and slacks, ensuring you are always of a tailored, uncluttered appearance. While the models were young, they exuded what would, in the space of a few short years, become the style for an older generation, and then soon after would become somewhat old-fashioned against the rise of excitingly daring youth fashions. For one thing, these skirts did not show the knee. 2 years later, Jean Shrimpton, the darling of a new wave of models who emerged in swinging London, visited Australia, and I'm sure you all know the story. She wore DuPont's new synthetic fabric, all on. But she stunned racegoers at Flemington Racecourse and Derby Day, dressed informally for the members' enclosure in a shift dress that showed her knees, is an understatement. Commentator and social wit Keith Dunstan, writing for The Bulletin under the pseudonym Batman, would a decade later describe it as the moment that Shrimpton startled every female in Melbourne to the tip of their stilettos. As shockwaves rippled across the country, DuPont's synthetic fibres gained unimagined publicity. The following year, DuPont smugly confirmed in one Australian trade journal that Shrimpton had hit the headlines, raised the hemlines, and made an unforgettable fashion impact for all on. I am going to get to higher hemlines, but before I do, let me pause for a moment in 1966, the year that the woolmark symbol rolled out across Australia. You'll see it at the centre of this advertisement for skirts and trousers. Described in Australian fashion news as composed of a classically simple grouping of swirling lines symboling both the timelessness of wool and its modernity in the space age, the woolmark had already been launched in the United States, in England, Japan, France, Italy, and other European countries. To carry this symbol, garments, blankets, and hand-knitting yarns needed to meet high standards. They had to be exclusively of sheep or lamb fibres, although an allowance of not more than 5% of other visible fibre for decorative effect was allowed. The fibres must be in their first use, that is, new wool rather than recycled and in a second, third or fourth use. Woven fabrics should meet a minimal tensile strength for both the warp and the weft. Colour fastness to light and perspiration for woven and knitted fabric, plus hand-knitting yarns, was essential. And the Australian Wool Board inspected manufacturing plants and tested goods before it allowed this symbol to be used. Really protective of the quality guaranteed that it represented. And they did this for good reason. Woolmark would go on to be hugely successful for global consumers, and I would argue still is today. Fletcher Jones was licensed to carry the Woolmark symbol that first year in Australia in 1966, and you'll see it in a number of sides to follow. This one is from a 1969 catalogue, and I did want to quickly take you to 1969 now, because that year Fletcher Jones commissioned a survey to capture women's attitudes to skirts and to slacks, asking a series of questions in order to prompt what he called psychological observations. What he was after was an understanding both of the good and the bad of his skirts and slacks, and to better understand what encouraged women to buy these garments, or what might have prevented them from doing so. And there was plenty to be proud of. Melbourne women, the report found, profoundly admire Fletcher Jones for honesty of dealing, consideration of staff, beautifying their factory until it has become a tourist attraction, providing the highest possible quality materials, and taking the utmost care to ensure a perfect fit for any garment sold. I should say there were no mention of what the Ballarat women thought of his garments. But Fletcher Jones's outstanding reputation for fit, quality of materials, and tailoring was also a double-edged sword. Some women felt the quality of garments meant that they were priced beyond their reach. Others considered Jones's garments to be the Rolls-Royce of ready-made women's garments, in that they could be worn across many, many, many years. But women wondered why this had to be the case in today's shifting fashion field. Most women like changes, the report explained. And for young women in particular, and the survey's authors described them as highly strung, impulsive girls, but they would be the customers of the future, Fletcher Jones's garments were considered too old-fashioned, and they were considered not with it. This was particularly the case with skirt length and the cut of the slacks. Essentially, the Fletcher Jones label was not adventurous enough for them. One of the most fascinating findings from that survey, described by its authors as an important hidden factor that links back to the first part of my presentation, was that some younger women avoided Fletcher Jones's garments because they tend to be masculine and conservative, rather than catering to the fashion conscious, to feminine interests. The report's authors posed a series of questions to try to better understand their thinking, and I'll read some of these questions. Does this stem from the wholly masculine business which Fletcher Jones has conducted until comparatively recent years? Or are Fletcher Jones garments, by reason of cut, colour, material, etc., masculine by comparison with other makes? Would an analysis of a study of women who buy Fletcher Jones skirts and slacks show that many comprise that segment of women who tend to be athletic, dominant, and outdoorish, including country women, rather than consist largely of those young women who fall into the truly feminine segment? And another question, does the atmosphere of Fletcher Jones's stores contribute to this idea of masculinity? So I'll let you be the judge with this photograph of the interior of the Ballarat store. Against the lingering attitude revealed in the survey of Fletcher Jones skirts and slacks being old-fashioned, the catalogues from the late 1960s show something that I think is actually very different. I'd love to know if you agree with me as well. So one example, the models for the Fletcher Jones garments had transformed. They captured instead a distinct look of the 1960s. The model in slacks near the top centre here bears, I think, more than a passing resemblance to Twiggy, the teenage model and fashion icon of the 1960s, who was known for her androgynous style and her boyishly short hair. Adding to that, skirts were now cut well above the knee and paired with bold tights that drew further attention to the legs, creating texture and pattern to complement or to clash, both were good, with the skirts they were worn with. The Australian trade journal Australian Fashion News had noted that skirt trends for the young now comprised the triangular look. Hemlines are 2 to 4 inches above the knee. But Jones's catalogues pushed beyond the boundaries of old-fashioned, further still with sleek, modern aesthetics in photography. On this bold catalogue cover for 1969, I'd like to point out the line below Fletcher Jones's name that reads, "Australian wools you want to live in." The catalogue described this skirt's geometric pattern as strikingly different. Excitement stems, from the Australian pure new wool worsted. I got a little bit distracted then because I wanted to remember that I have the skirt here. It's a really gorgeous skirt. Text inside the catalogue reassured customers that Fletcher Jones knows all the fashion things that are happening and interprets them for you. For instance, the fashion centres say skirts stay above the knee, and I think you'll agree that that one is pretty short. Slacks had also become much more form-fitting, skimming the waist that you'll see here, skimming the hips and the legs as well, with clever new features like the matching belt for those at the right of this image that could be unbuttoned and removed. And the description for that is, sometimes a girl won't want to wear the matching belt. And the girls modelling the slim trim pants embodied the look of the decade with their heavy eyeliner and lashes. This sleek new modern styling and bold lines echoed synthetics fashion promotions, but did so with the constant reminder of Fletcher Jones's quality. The woolmark symbol featured consistently alongside the alluring descriptions, like this one for the skirt at the right that was très chic, concealing all those buttons with one perfect pleat. Glittery gold clip from Paris holds the wrap over. To underline the French influence, this skirt was available in red, white, and navy. So, conscious that I am very quickly nearing the end of my time with you, I wanted to move now to my third theme. One aspect of the Fletcher Jones business model resonates strongly in the present, and I think it's one that can perhaps inspire change, especially as we grapple with the consequences of our passion for fashion. The average Australian now purchases a massive 53 items of clothing each year. Some of these clothes will never be worn. Others will be worn a handful of times before they're thrown out as landfill, their synthetic fibres unable to break down. Jones's clothes were designed and made to last. Customers were encouraged to care for their clothes, to keep them looking spruce, as this booklet called it. Simple practices were encouraged at home, so trousers could be revived with brushing, and they loved to be aired. Spot soiling could be sponged off, and resting and good storage refreshed them further still. Jones provided an after-sales service that performed a valuable function, cleaning, repairing, and rejuvenating Fletcher Jones garments to extend their wearable life. Trousers sent for dry cleaning returned not only meticulously clean, but pressed from the inside to flatten and smooth seams, bands, and pockets. They were also form set, a process that returned trousers to their original fitting and precise proportion. To get a sense of the uptake of this service performed by what were called happy, highly skilled people working with up-to-the-minute equipment in pleasant surroundings, remembering they're down in Warrnambool, as one leaflet put it, in a typical week in 1950, for example, the dry cleaning and repairs unit worked on major alterations to 220 pairs of trousers, performed major repairs to 255 pairs, minor repairs to 460 pairs of trousers, put in major darns to 1,059 pairs, and added new cuffs to 98 pairs. So that's all in a typical week. In October that year, more than 7,800 pairs of trousers were reformed, pressed, and repaired. Small tears were repaired and darns were made free of charge. Larger repairs incurred a cost, but customers were reminded, when your plus eights reach retiring age, let us quote for giving them a new lease of life. Our dry cleaning, reforming and repair service produces transformations. We will painstakingly care for yours from cat cradle to grave. The special repair service soon extended to 37 different repair types. This included rebinding pockets and letting out or reducing the waist following weight loss or weight gain, which I know would be really handy for me. Patching was done using matching fabric from what the trousers had been made, with samples kept from every cloth that was used, so that no matter how old your Fletcher Jones trousers, a tear or burn can be mended to perfection. Customers were assured that Fletcher Jones trousers would be kept tidy, as this leaflet expressed it, or elsewhere that the company will remain interested in your +8s as long as you are. Fletcher Jones called this a lifetime repair service. And as this label from the skirt that you're handing around shows, so have a look at that as well as you're going. Fletcher Jones will care for this garment always. This kind of care service is something that I think we could use today to keep our clothes in good repair, worn across years and by multiple people. It could help us to counteract the startling figures around our consumption and disposal of clothing. With 1.42 billion items of clothing sold here in 2023, at the same time that 222,000 tonnes of clothing went to Australian landfill. And returning again to wearing natural fibres like wool would mean that even if clothes went to landfill, they would more readily break down and re-enter the soil, something that synthetics can't. So let me end with one final remark. My time with the Fletcher Jones Business and Family Records was one of such rich discovery that I've only skimmed across the surface with you today. I laughed out loud at some of Jones's comments, drawing concerned glances from those in an otherwise hushed reading room at Melbourne Uni. I oohed and ahed more quietly over the catalogues, the artwork and the images, some of which I've shown you today. But even more, I developed a really profound respect for what Fletcher Jones and his staff built over many decades, that touched so many Australians in ways both big and small, and that rightly made Fletcher Jones a household name, one that may still echo in your home today. Thank you.